Hi, I'm Susan Rutledge, author of Creating Pattern Brushes in Adobe Illustrator, here today with another tutorial on how to make a pattern brush. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and check my book out on Amazon.com. In this video, I'll show you how to make a seamless rope pattern brush. I'll begin with making my design with the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M. I'll draw a rectangle out on the board and I will give it a brown fill and a black 2-point stroke. And then I'll get the direct selection tool, keyboard shortcut A. I'm going to click on the artboard because all of the anchor points are selected and I only want to select 2. I'm going to hold down the shift key and click on the top right anchor point and the bottom left anchor point, and then I'll drag the handles to the center, and I'm going to drag to 1.5 inches and release my mouse. I'll click on the artboard to deselect the object, and I'll come over and get the selection tool and select the object. If I had left the direct selection tool active when I rotate my object, it would have skewed all of the anchor points. So that's why I move from the direct selection tool to the selection tool. And now I'm going to use the rotate tool, which is keyboard shortcut R. I'll hold my shift key down and drag up and to the right until I have a 45-degree angle, and then I'll release my mouse. And I'll get the selection tool and move my object over to the left side of the artboard, and then move into the outline viewing mode, keyboard shortcut Command Y. I want to make a duplicate of this object, and so I'm going to drag it to the right, holding down the shift and the option keys. And I'm going to do my best to get those lines right on top of each other, and then I'll release my mouse. And to duplicate that move, I'll use the keyboard shortcut Command D. And I believe those are very well placed. So I'm going to just select all of them and move them to the center of the artboard. Now this is going to be the design for the repeating pattern. So I'm going to use the right half of my left object and all of the center one and just the left part of the right object. And when I place those in a bounding box, it's going to tell Illustrator exactly how to place them in that repeat. And if I am precise with all of my lines, it should make my pattern brush seamless. The bounding box has to be invisible, so we'll get the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M, and come over to the Properties panel and remove the fill color and remove the stroke. And then I'll start in the center of my left object, and I'm going to drag down. I'm going to try to get that just a little lower. There we go. I'll drag down. I want to get the bottom part of the objects, and I'll match up to the center of that right object, and I'll release my mouse. Now I'm going to get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V. In addition to the bounding box being invisible, it has got to be at the back of the design. And let's go to the Layers panel, and I'll show you that because it is the most recent object that was drawn, it's in front of the design. And I can either just select it and drag it down, or let me undo that, keyboard shortcut Command Z. I can use the keyboard shortcut Shift Command left bracket. This is one of the shortcuts that you're going to use a lot because when we make pattern brushes, many times they have a bounding box, and every time that bounding box has to go to the back. Okay, I'm going to go back now into the preview mode, keyboard shortcut Command Y, and I'm going to select the objects and the bounding box and group them using the keyboard shortcut Command G. I could drag this into the brushes panel now, but my pattern brush would be pretty big for this artboard. So I'm going to resize it. I'll go to Object, Transform, Scale, and I'm going to scale it to 35%. I have Scale Corners and Scale Strokes and Effects checked, and I'll say OK. Then I'll open the brushes panel, and I'm going to drag our side tile in, and I'll click Pattern Brush and say OK, And let's name this rope and say OK. Then I'll move my side tile up out of the way and get the ellipse tool, keyboard shortcut L, and drag out an ellipse on the artboard, and I'll click on our rope pattern brush and get the selection tool, and you can see that we have our seamless pattern brush applied. Now I can come to the properties panel and I can reduce the size or I can increase the size. You may notice a little overlap here, and sometimes that happens on the circular applications. It also can sometimes happen when the shape in the side tile is a little irregular. And you can fix that, but you need to make sure that your pattern brush is the size that you want it to be, because you have to convert this all to outlines, and you can no longer come in and change the size of the pattern brush on that particular stroke. So I'm going to leave it at 2 points, and I'm going to go up to Object, come down to Path, and click on Outline Stroke. And now every single anchor is editable. And I will click on the artboard, and then I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Z, and I'll zoom in here so that we can see exactly what we're working on. I'll get the direct selection tool, keyboard shortcut A, and I'm going to click on this object, and maybe I won't have to do a whole lot. I'll grab that anchor and I'm going to move it. Let's see, I'll move it down to about here, and I'm going to get the smooth tool. And you may have the pencil tool showing on your toolbar, and you have to just get the pull-out menu to find smooth. And I'm going to just draw over this line, and Illustrator smooths it out for me. Then I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I'm going to return my artboard to the original size, keyboard shortcut Command 0, and I think that's going to look great. And you can apply the pattern brush to any kind of an object without corners. You can apply it to the straight line, or you can even use the paintbrush tool, keyboard shortcut B, and paint with it. But when you move to anything with corners, the rope pattern brush doesn't work so well. I'll get the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M, and I'll drag out a rectangle, and let me just show you. Let's apply the pattern brush and get the selection tool and deselect the rectangle. And you can see how bad these corners look. I have spent hours trying to edit rope pattern brush corners before, and it's just almost impossible. What I suggest is that you select the object, you get the direct selection tool, keyboard shortcut A, and you simply drag the handles a little bit to round the corners. And that looks much better, and I think it's going to be acceptable for most projects. I'm going to get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I want to show you one other thing that you can do with pattern brushes. So I'm going to select our object and come down here into the brushes panel, and there's a little icon that gives you options for your selected object. I'm going to click on that, and under colorization method, I'm going to change it from none to tints. Now the color of the fill and the stroke of the pattern brush are going to be determined by the color of the stroke in the properties panel that it's applied to, and you can change that as many times as you want. Right now the stroke color is black, but I can change it to green, and then I'll end up with a green stroke and a green fill. It's always going to be a shade of the color that the stroke is in the properties panel. So I can change it to red. I'll have a red fill and a red stroke. Then if I want to change it to purple, I change it there, and you kind of get the idea. You can do it as many times as you want without changing the original pattern brush. Come over to the brushes panel and click on our pattern brush, and we're back where we started. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and it's been helpful. Join me again soon for another video on creating pattern brushes in Adobe Illustrator. Thanks for watching. Bye now.